The embassy works closely with all of our state agencies in trying to develop our economic links. In addition to Enterprise Ireland's commitment to Mexico, which is shown again by the seminar series, our Foreign Investment Agency, the IDA, and our Food Promotion Agency, Board BIA, have recently stepped up their engagement with Mexico, assigning responsibility to staff in San Francisco and New York to put more work and effort into developing our relations here. Over the summer, Education in Ireland, an agency under Enterprise Ireland, also appointed a new digital marketing partner in Mexico. I'm confident, I think Enterprise Ireland and the other state agencies are confident that the next months and years are going to be really positive for our bilateral economic relationship. Of course, in Ireland, like in Mexico, we'll be navigating our economies over the coming months and probably years in the pandemic context. In Ireland, the government was very pleased yesterday to be able to announce a new reopening plan up to the end of October. We're confident that our economy is really back, but of course we will be taking it slowly and continuing to watch what is happening. Let me make just one point unrelated to FinTech before I hand back over to the speakers, which is today is also a very important day for Ireland. We have this morning as a country taken over the presidency of the UN Security Council. We've done so at a time of many really serious international crises, not least as the current situation in Afghanistan. As a country, we're really conscious of the high level of responsibility which comes with this role. And we're pleased that Mexico remains our partner on the UN Security Council, and we'll be working really closely with Mexico over the next month of our presidency and for the remainder of our terms. So now let's get back to focusing on FinTech, and I'll hand over to Orla to get us started on the three great speakers we have this morning. We're really pleased with the lineup this morning. They're three excellent speakers and we're looking forward to hearing from them. Thank you.
Ambassador, thank you so much for your words and for that overview of Ireland's role in promoting not only FinTech, but wider collaboration between Ireland and Mexico, and for that important note in respect of Ireland's role on the UN Security Council, in which, collaborating with Mexico, we aim to provide certainly noble leadership in a complex context. Now it's my great pleasure to introduce my colleague, indeed, at Agave Business School, erstwhile Professor of Finance at the Agave Business School and former Director of the Santa Fe, Mexico City operation of Agave Business School, CPC, José Antonio Quesada Palacios. Welcome, José Antonio. José Antonio is the Vice President of Regulatory Policy at the National Banking and Securities Commission, the Comisión Nacional Bancaria de Valores, aquí en Mexico. And at the National Banking and Securities Commission, he also serves in many different roles. He's the Executive Secretary of the National Council for Financial Inclusion. He's a member of the board of the AFI, the Alliance for Financial Inclusion. He's a member of the board of directors of the Association of Supervisors of Banks of the Americas. He's a representative of the CMB to the Basel Committee on Banking Supervision, among many other roles, including his membership of the board of directors of the IOSCO, the International Organization of Security Commissions. And he chairs that committee here in Latin America as part of the Inter-America Regional Committee of the EARC as well. He previously collaborated at Agave Business School and continues as a professor, as I said. He was also president of the Mexican Institute for Finance Executives, the IMEF, and he was a member of the board of directors of PwC, a firm of which during many years he was a very successful partner. He has a degree in accounting from the Ibero University, a master's degree in an MBA from the ITAM, a master's degree in accounting also from the ITAM and FIU, and he is a certified public accountant at the Colegio de Contadores Públicos in Mexico, and he is currently studying his doctorate in finance at the Agave Business School in Tecnológico de Monterrey. José Antonio, a very warm Irish Mexican welcome to you and to this seminar. We're anxious to hear from you. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Orla. I appreciate your kind words. I do appreciate also the words from Ambassador Maeve. I send regards also to Miguel Malfan, our ambassador. And well, I did a very brief presentation that hopefully is going to summarize what we have been doing in this journey. That is how I describe it since we started the pandemic. So briefly, if you allow me, you have this presentation. So if we go to the next slide, and as you saw, there are many slides, so I will go through them very quickly. As I said, we are living not only at the fintech companies, but in the financial services industry. We are living a journey, and this journey is a very important journey for all the players. So banks, SOFIPOS, SOCAPs, all the entities that are embedded into the industry are going through the same process, that is the digitalization and the transformation of their channels. For us, it's very important also to have a level playing field for all the players. So we have frequently questions about rules and regulations that are issued by some players, and they are not replicated to the others. So we are reviewing and enhancing the regulations as fast as we can. And in this regard, as you can see, well, we have been launching some reforms to the digitalization through the onboarding remote. Remote onboarding is now part of the doing, and they can do it by some accounts. As you may know, we have 4 categories to be opened. So now they can access them remotely at the 2 basic levels, and we will continue going forward in the way that they can do it. They can open accounts, as I said, from home. It was impossible to do that at the beginning of the pandemic. So there are several tramits, paperwork that they can do also to do or to ask for additional products. If we go to the next slide, we can see that regarding digital financial inclusion, as you mentioned, at the Banking Commission, we are in the secretariat of the financial inclusion policy. So we coordinate all the other authorities to go through this very important policy for our country. So we take into consideration the studies that all of them do in order to increase the financial inclusion. And why we believe that financial inclusion is important? Well, because they can make affordable, efficient, and safe financial services for all, having as mechanisms inclusive digital financial services. And you have there some examples, such as mobile money, online accounts, insurance, credit, and new fintech applications. So I think the fintech companies are playing a very important role in increasing, expanding, and going deeper into the financial inclusion. So if we go to the next slide, you will see that we have drafted that the benefits for financial inclusion, because we are not chasing or pursuing a financial inclusion as the final cause, but as a way to enhance the living of our population, because it can reduce the cost in the case of digital payments. They can do savings, so they can increase their capacity to absorb financial shocks, such as the ones that we have suffered in the last years. Access to credit, which is going to allow the population to invest in assets to start or increase participation in certain economic activities. And well, last but not least, to save and apply for credit, make and receive payments, and manage risk is essential for the empowerment of women. So there is a gender agenda embedded into the financial inclusion one. So for us, it's very important to see that as we go deeper and at Tec de Monterrey, as you know, at the GADE, Professor Posas is helping us too with some research about the benefits of financial inclusion, well, I think you can keep going with the benefits that you can get. If we go to the next slide, I think it is very important to see that there is a convergence between the appropriate legal and regulatory framework and the growth and the ability to promote financial inclusion. So we know that if we amend or change or do some enhancements to our current regulation, we will have an impact directly on the current players, but also in the ones that are coming. So e-money and digital banking improvements in the quality of regulation goes directly to increase financial inclusion. If we go to the next one, you can see some surveys that we just got from the impacts of COVID. So these slides are very interesting because you can see the impact that financial inclusion and in this case digitalization is having on emerging economies versus advanced economies. So if we go to the chapter of digital payments and remittances, obviously the emerging markets and the developing economies have been benefited more than the advanced ones. The same with digital banking, digital savings or deposits, digital lending. I think in the case of InsurTech, you can see that these specific chapters or wealth tech or market provisioning, advanced economies are heading more than the emerging economies. But I think it's because we are building towards that path, and we are going in this maturity process that is very important for them too. And finally, but not less important, the part of crypto asset exchange and digital custody. I think we have been reluctant to take measures in our market for not to pollute or contaminate our financial services with cryptocurrencies, but we are studying the way to do it, the way to approach it, and the way to connect with what other central banks are doing in order to recognize and later on probably operate with cryptos. So as you see, we have a very wide agenda. And if we go to the next slide, we can see also some of the regulatory measures that we have taken during the pandemic. So if you see KYC, digital identity, were very important for us in emerging and also in advanced economies because they were the enablers precisely to do this remote onboarding. So we need to have a strong AML controls in order to operate. We issue also some regulations for economic relief. So we did these moratorias in order to do some relief to the population because some of them were losing jobs, so they stopped their activities for a while. So we focus on them. Business continuity too. As you may imagine, cybersecurity was one of the threats that we saw increasingly. So we had to take some measures about that too. And I think we are as concerned as the advanced economies. And well, there is a shortage on employment and talent that it is important to see how they are going to be collected because at the end of the day, they are very important to build these robust financial institutions. If we go to the next slide, please. Basically, what I try to do is to summarize the impact of digital financial inclusion and growth. So in TICs, or in this case, ICTs, that are basically entities that are related to communication and technology information, they are having a very strong impact. And I think this slide makes me help to talk about what fintech is in Mexico. So just to close the chapter of financial inclusion, if we go to the next slide, please. What I can tell you is that, well, the impact of financial inclusion and growth is something very tangible. So I think by promoting credit penetration, we help the population to maintain and to alleviate the circumstances that they are living. The expansion of information technologies has benefited credit penetration around the world. As you see, the expansion of cell phones has promoted the financial development of low and middle income countries. So we truly believe that if we go closer to the telecom reforms that they are in process, and with those service players in the telecom industry, we will go rapidly in the financial inclusion. And you have here some papers, some research about that. Well, now, if we go to the next slide, let me talk a little bit about financial inclusion related specifically to the fintech law. So what I can tell you is that if we go to the next slide, Mexico is a pioneer in the regulation of the fintech sector. What I can tell you is that our law was issued in 2018, in the year that President Peña was leaving in March. So this law had to be amended with secondary regulation to go to the specifics about how this law would work. So what I want to tell you is that talking with la Asociación Mexicana de Fintech, we try to get closer with them. Maria Teresa Arnal, that is the president, the current president, and you mentioned Cubo. Cubo is an ally too. They are our innovation hub. At the beginning, you were mentioning in Ireland, the innovation hub that you have. Well, we basically try to go to the market directly. And as you may imagine, there are plenty players, more than 500 in accordance with their numbers, that are fintech companies. Well, in the case of ours, the fintech law in Mexico basically is comprised of crowdfunding institution and electronic payment fund institutions. So these two entities are the ones that are comprised into our fintech law. That doesn't mean that are the only fintech companies working in the market. Obviously, as you may imagine, you have a very good paper from the Irish attorneys staff that is called the Irish Advantage: RegTech Beyond Compliance, from Prost and Sullivan, that is an attorneys based in Ireland. And they have a very comprehensive view about what the industry is about. So we have obviously RegTech, we have InsurTech, we have PropTech. There are other areas where companies are basically based on technology, and the Mexican Association of Fintech is comprising most of them. So the regulation in this case, as I mentioned, goes specifically to these entities, and there is a big discussion, and I don't want to go into this, but just for you to be aware that the World Bank, Banco, is entitled to be used only for the ones that are having the license as a bank. Well, there is a controversy if in the fintech case would be pretty much the same. And well, if you see the law in the Spanish version goes basically to the payments and crowdfunding institutions. So that's why fintech has a word is a generic. Anyhow, as you can see, our agenda is wider. So we have also the open banking work, the open banking piece that in Mexico is basically dedicated to open finance. For what I mentioned, it goes not only specifically to the banks, but all the financial industry players. So we need to work for them to be included too, and it's specific into APIs. We have a sandbox that is very helpful to the ones that want to experiment with very novel models. And we have the final one, the transactions that is only allowed to banks and FDI, the transactions with virtual assets. That is what I just mentioned about cryptos, and it's basically used to operate it with virtual assets inside the financial institutions, not with the public. So this is what the fintech law brings. And if we go to the next slide, you can see the journey in the fintech regulatory framework. So you have here all the goals that we have accomplished and the journey that I was explaining. And as you may see, in 2021, we are still working to make some amendments to the digital transformation agenda as a whole. And we have been authorizing and licensing some of the fintech. So the last slides that I will project, if we go to the next one, goes basically to the crowdfunding institutions. You have here the defined activity in the law, the categories of crowdfunding that are specific at the law. If we go to the next one, we have the ones related to payment fund institutions. And finally, if we go to the next one, you have what we have now authorized. So we have 96 applicants, and from these applicants, basically we have companies in the authorization process, 18 that are going for payments, 7 for crowdfunding, and we have 71 settled companies, 38 authorized with restrictions, and 15 authorized completely. So the ones that are authorized with restrictions basically need to reinforce some of the areas of operation that they are having in order to have the permanent authorization. Other ones, otherwise they are not going to be able to continue operating later on. And finally, if we go to the next slide, there is a full agenda about what APIs are going to do. There is a big discussion about having fintech as a service or banking as a service, and we have some specific rules that we're reviewing in order to have the needed infrastructure for them to operate. Otherwise, we will have some shells operating as a front and with no structure in the back. It is very important also for you to know that regarding to cryptos and some other activities, the SAT, the Mexican IRS, are basically taking care of the activities that they are having. So it is very important to be compliant with the SAT too. And last but not least, the fraud detection agenda is something that is very relevant for us too. So we are working with Conducef in order to avoid and maintain all the scams that the population may suffer. If we go to the next slide, as you see in the regulatory sandbox, we have these novel models related to technological tools or media, financial activity that requires authorization or registration or concession, and some modalities other than those existing in the market. So those may be tested in the sandbox, and I think this goes very close to the connection that I was mentioning about having an innovation hub and trying to get some new schemes that may be very useful for our market. Just as I mentioned for Patrick Sheehan later on, and as Mr. Güemez knows, our country has a very small inclusion percentage. We have roughly 36% of our population included in the financial industry, So there is plenty room for the country to grow into the inclusive agenda. And I think these new players may test in a safer manner to go to those areas that are not really currently part of the financial inclusion from the current players, or new schemes to make them more competitive as well. And last, the next slide, this is what I can tell you about virtual assets. As I was discussing, we do recognize that there are cryptos operated in the market. Some of them are operated by companies that are located outside Mexico. We are reviewing how these companies basically are trading in the way to have licit and avoid illicit activities. So the first concern is in the anti-money laundering provisions. The second one is we know the market is asking for these assets to be part of the financial inclusion agenda, especially a very young segment of the population is very eager to experiment with them. So we know that. So we are talking with the central bank about what would be the next steps for them to get a cryptocurrency that would be authorized to be traded publicly. But in this moment, everything is in drafts. So we will keep you posted for you to know about the next steps. So dear Orla, this is what I had for you this morning. I hope it has been clear. And otherwise, if you want to ask me questions right away or at the end, it's up to you. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, José Antonio. Thank you very much. Honestly, I think you've created there in those short 20 or so minutes, actually, a masterclass on digital inclusion in Mexico and the opportunities here in this important developing market, and also in terms of the pioneering work that you, of course, are leading from the CNBV. And providing an example in the regulatory framework for fintech around the world. Now, José Antonio, maybe at this moment we could just provide a question to you, just since we have it top of mind. And I think one of them, one of the questions that we have here from Igor Rivera is connected with the sandbox that you just mentioned at the end, with respect rather to, you know, the impacts for entrepreneurs, regulators, and financial systems, and you know, the novel innovations in that respect. So I think one of the questions from Igor there is, how is the sandbox doing? And also if you've any sort of comparative KPIs on the success of the regulated figures compared to other countries. I know that you mentioned the work of Frost Sullivan in terms of giving an overview of Ireland and its advances in regulation, but I think Igor is asking about whether you might know anything about financial centres such as Ireland or such as Singapore, for example, or any other that are comparative to Mexico. So the sandbox and the KPIs on the regulatory context. José Antonio, your comments, please.
Sure. Thank you. Regards to Mr. Rivera. And I can tell you that part of my discussion with the Asociación de Fintech with María T. Arnal and with Cubo and Vicente Fenol in the past days goes precisely in this direction, because it seems that we have been doing the innovation and the sandbox in real life and in real time. So I have been enticing them to use it. We have very few cases, but I think we need to use it more oftenly in a way to go digital, to go more aggressive in the way to open accounts with higher amounts, in the way to operate digital payments of different levels. Let me tell you that it is very interesting to see that because of these limits, it seems that some companies are having some restrictions and they cannot operate with the segment of the population that they want to. So we need to make more flexible, more smart, more intelligent AML models that we currently have. And I think we need to go into artificial intelligence faster to know better our customers and how we need to allow them to operate with more flexibility for the ones that need it, and be more careful with the ones that we don't know or we don't have enough information. So what I can tell you is that we have been working with them, but we need to go faster. The cases that we have are not significant yet. We are establishing KPIs, as you mentioned, and we are looking at this point to what the Financial Services Authority in the UK is doing, and other hubs, as you just mentioned. There is a document that I want to read often about the industry. This is from KPMG, Pulse of Fintech in 2021. And as I just mentioned, it is very interesting to see how the APIs are connecting to help the life easier. And you can go deeper into some areas that are very foggy, even in Europe. So, for example, protecting your data, your personal data. So what you can do about opening your data to some providers, but what you need to do with others, or if this is going to be a general agreement for all of them to comply with. So there are questions that are very important for us, and that there are some holes that we need to fill with adequate regulation for all the players to be leveled in the same direction. So sorry for this very comprehensive response, but I think it's so general because we are in the inception of using the sandbox more oftenly, and since you are in Negade, I think we are eager to look for entrepreneurs to come here at the sandbox and use it more oftenly.
Excellent. Thank you, José Antonio, and that's certainly an invitation to collaborate that I have no doubt Igor and many other of our colleagues connected from Tec de Monterrey and other universities across Mexico, along with financial institutions, will take up in terms of that collaboration on the sandbox. Now, there is another question for you, José Antonio, but I hope that we'll be able to get to that while we have a discussion with the panel in a moment. If I may now continue with our next presentation. I'm delighted to welcome Guillermo Güemez to this panel and webinar. Guillermo is the Director General of Innovation at Grupo Financiero Banorte. He was previously CIO at Banco Walmart, where he was responsible for the startup process and certification before the regulators here in Mexico. He also worked in Telmex, Mexico's leading telecommunications provider, as product director in Red Uno, as well as general manager in Triana, Telmex's data center since it was founded. And he's worked at EDS, he's worked at Booz Allen and Hamilton in various strategic development projects. He's a member of the Mexican Stock Exchange Technology Board. He holds a Bachelor of Science degree in Computer Science from Tecnológico de Monterrey in Mexico and an MBA from Stanford University. And Guillermo is recognized across the region as one of the leading fintech leaders, and certainly from the banking sector and financial institution sector here in Mexico, one of the most recognized CIOs in the marketplace today. Guillermo, it's a real pleasure to welcome you. Thanks for sharing your thoughts on FinTech Mexico.
Orla, thank you for your kind exaggerations. Thank you to Ambassador von Heynitz for her invitation, and to the Irish Mexican Chamber for the invitation to speak. I'm going to have a very different view, or let's say a different perspective on my speech. If you can go to the next slide, to the next two slides, actually. So first I wanted to say, do I really want to talk about fintechs? What do I have to say to the fintechs about their fintechs? And the trick here is, if I look at it as a bank 3 years ago, I don't really want to talk to them. And that was the general feeling about banks and fintechs 3 years ago. If I want to talk to you about as a customer, there are a lot of things I would love to talk about fintechs. And I don't want my boss to hear that too much, but in general, fintechs would provide a wonderful outlet for a lot of customer issues. So I said, okay, let's talk about fintechs. And if you go to the next slide, I'm going to be arrogant for a second and say, so what is a fintech? And there's a definition here you can find. And, yes, there are small companies that are trying to, merge finance and technology, and you go across all the segments of finance. But in reality, what I seem to see, fintechs exist because of a simple reason in the industry. That's where the money is. Okay. Every time there is a new technology disruption, everybody goes after finance because that's where the money is. And so people, it's very normal that any technology disruption, and I'm not talking about the last one in 2020, in 2000, it was the same. And if you read the history books, it happens all the time. It's not the first fintech wave we've seen. So sorry, I lost that. So fintechs have been around a while and they're doing wonderful things, but what are the problems? I'm not going to tell you what you do. If you can go to the next slide. What do I see that fintechs have that are problematic? And most of you are very clear about this. You have varied regulatory practices across countries. And this is very clear. I'll touch upon it a little later on. But I see a lot of fintechs show up and not understand what's going on in Mexico and how Mexico works. Another problem that's very classical is fraud. I see especially a lot of small fintechs in Mexico that show up and you point blank ask them, have you had any fraud? And no, they haven't. It's okay, wait a while and provision something for that because you will. As soon as you get big enough, you will get fraud and it will disrupt you, okay? And the other one is banking differences across countries, not only just the regulatory differences, but the banking differences. People don't realize that banking varies wildly across the world. Okay, so if you go to the next slide, Orla, please. No, the previous one. So in the past few years, we've seen wonderful things come out of fintechs. As you mentioned, the Stripe, and we are partners with the Stripe in Banorte, and I happen to be a close friend of Mariate. It's a wonderful thing that's changing how we can roll out payment systems in Mexico, PayPal. And there's wonderful fintechs all across the world. The crypto system, the cryptocurrency system that José Antonio mentioned before is still expanding, and we still have to see what's going to happen there in Mexico and in the world. But it's changing the traditional landscape of banking gently, but it is changing it. And the trick is, how do we, from the bank, see the fintechs? And that's part of where I'm headed. And if you now go to the next one, Orla, please. So in general, banks we have a 4 points, or we view fintechs in 4 classes. So the first ones are the new fintechs that are banks. They're just plain out competition. Clearly, that's a very small segment of the whole fintech population. And we view them as banks, we view them somewhat skeptically and delicately. There's a lot of banking front ends, especially a few years ago. There was a view that, yes, we're going to come up with a new front end that's going to make banking beautiful, and we're going to kill the banks. We've seen most of them disappear. Then there is the third one, which is vertical financial services fintechs, i.e. payments, i.e. cross-country payments, or very specialized segments of banking. We've seen those grow and become very successful, and we're partnering with any of them that show up that have a reasonable, let's say, working plan. And finally, and this is where I see most of the service or the fintechs these days, are the horizontal services to the banks. So companies that not only provide value to customers, but provide value to banks per se. Okay, and in general, that's where we want to be focused, or that's where I'm focused on talking to Mr. Patrick Sheehan, who will talk to you in a few minutes, is one of those fintechs, and he can tell you that it wasn't very difficult to get a talk with me. Not, I mean, not that we're going to buy everything, but it's the kind of thing we're interested in. Okay. Now, I was going to talk a little bit about Mexico, and José Antonio just gave you the updated numbers. He has a privileged access that I don't have to these numbers. So, but Mexico, the Banking Commission has a very sophisticated, let's say, very advanced fintech law. And in general, the Mexican banking law is fairly sophisticated. We have some new players as from these numbers. José Antonio mentioned they have now 75 authorization requests. So clearly my numbers are a little outdated. But the Mexican ecosystem is fairly well versed in fintechs and in banks. If you go to the next one, but not only banks, we have a lot of what are called the fintechs, which José Antonio also mentioned, you know, in trading, in crowdfunding, in insurtech, in banks, in community lending. There is a hodgepodge of fintechs all over the Mexican market that are trying to do what all of the fintechs are trying to do, which is, or hopefully all the fintechs are trying to do, which is improve the customer experience. And to give you a little more, let's say, more detail, if you go to the next one, there is really a lot of fintechs, and they are hopefully doing what I said, okay? Which is improving customer experience for the end customer. Now, I'm going to close with two questions, which is why Mexico? And I think this has been mentioned by Orla and by José Antonio. Mexico is a, you know, reasonably well placed within the investors' targets as a place to fund. So according to Core Fusion, we have about $1.3 billion of funding into the country last year, second to Brazil, but catching up quickly. That's one point, but the real point is we have a very high level of unbanked population. This is a wonderful opportunity for a lot of the fintechs to provide services. It's a very tough nut to crack because people assume that because they're unbanked, it's because the banks haven't tried. I'll be very honest and point blank about it. We have. It's not an easy segment of the population to catch or to attract, but it is a potentially very large, okay? And secondly, we have a very high penetration of mobile phones, which makes this an easy, again, easy accessible market, or easily accessible market. Pardon my English, sometimes fails me. This makes Mexico relatively attractive for external fintechs. Now, I have to say one thing. If you're going to do this and try to touch these markets, and you want to talk to banks, and if you can go to the last slide, please. I have three recommendations. One is understand the local environment. I will say two things about it. Everybody shows up in Mexico, not everybody, but a lot of people show up in Mexico and show me a real-time payment app that they want to implement. Mexico has had a real-time payment system for 10 years. We don't need an app like Venmo. Every bank in Mexico has an app like Venmo. We need other solutions. Other fintechs show up in Mexico assuming the security regulations in Mexico are very weak. And they show me very sophisticated things like tokens and, you know, two-factor authentication mechanisms. Those have been regulatory for the last 15 years. So Mexico has a very sophisticated banking environment. It is not a third world country in the banking system. So understand what the local environment looks like so that you can actually make headways in it. Secondly, if you want to talk to the banks, focus on the horizontal processes that create value for you and for the bank. Fintechs that show up at my doorstep saying, we want to, take over this market segment from you. Well, yes, but we're not going to work together to achieve that. If, however, you're providing me a mechanism to prevent fraud, to do AML, to speed up collections, anything of that nature, the bank will be very happy to work with you. Okay. And finally, and this is for my friend Patrick, well, not for my friend Patrick, but from, remember that bank time is not the same as fintech time. Okay. You're in a lot of hurry, we are not. So it takes a little time for us to talk and to set things up and start working. But we're interested in this anyway. And basically that's my message. I needed to do a few minutes. So I hope I'm done. And Orla, I'll send it back to you.
Very, very many thanks, Guillermo, for that executive summary of your view from the top, and particularly your comment to correct any misperception that might exist in relation to, as you say, the regulatory context and security system in Mexico. Quite the opposite of being weak. It's actually very strong, very regulated, and very sophisticated. And so the opportunities for collaboration in the area of the traditional banks that are moving through digital transformation to be obviously fintech players at the center of an ecosystem, and working with startups. You've mentioned that the focus should be on the horizontal processes to create value for both. The question would be, could you maybe talk very specifically about what sort of opportunities you see in that horizontal process that are most pressing in the Mexican market that fintech startups might consider in talking with banks like Grupo Financiero Banorte, for example? What would be the pressing areas?
I would say the internal security systems of the bank, those are always pressing in banks. The AML and KYC processes are always complex and they're always being improved. AI has done wonderful things for that. The onboarding system is a lot of people focus on the onboarding system. That's a little sophisticated in Mexico and it's very, let's say, localized to the Mexican market. If you have the integration done, that's fine. But if not, people sort of bring up we can recognize the identity card in Spain. Yes, but you can't do that in Mexico. That's irrelevant to me. The integration with the INE is what's key here. So I would focus on, again, the horizontal processes, and any generic tool that helps the bank with its processes is also welcome.
That's great. And I think that's back to your point, Guillermo, know your market, do your research, and certainly, work to find out exactly how you can add value in those horizontal processes that you mentioned with the partners you seeking to collaborate with in Mexico. And certainly Enterprise Ireland, the Irish Mexican Chamber, and leaders such as yourself, I know are very open to that collaboration and to providing, and helping Irish companies to find pathways in that respect of that collaboration in Mexico. So we'll leave that for now, because part of your comments are very related to Patrick Sheehan from Fenergo, who is our next speaker. And I'd like to introduce Patrick. He's the head of Americas for Fenergo, with responsibility for the company's go-to-market strategy right across this region. With nearly 20 years of experience, he is a well-recognized international business leader with a record of helping financial services institutions precisely transform and achieve desired business outcomes in terms of what we were just mentioning, Guillermo. Prior to joining Fenergo, Patrick was the CEO and co-founder of the Fellsway Group, which is a cyber risk management advisory firm. And he previously had leadership roles at Optiv, Fishnet Security, Juniper Network, Cisco Systems. He's a graduate of the Keenan Flagler Business School at UNC Chapel Hill. UNC is a proud partner of the Agave Business School as well. So Patrick, a double warm welcome to you, and we're eager to hear your story of Fenergo coming into the Mexican market and what you've been learning that you can share as well with our Irish audience. Thank you.
Gracias, Orla. Buenos dias a todos. Pleasure to be here. Thank you for Jose and Guillermo for setting the context for what I'll share with everybody this morning. So again, I'm Patrick Sheehan. I run the Americas for Fenergo. We're an Irish-based fintech. Fintech's a large market, as our previous speakers have demonstrated. We're really focused in the reg tech segment, so regulation technology. So fairly fitting for the conversation today. Next slide, please. So I'll talk very, very briefly on this just to set the stage. I think the previous speakers did a really good job. Fenergo is really focused on those horizontal processes that Guillermo mentioned. And one of them really is what we call client lifecycle management. So in the previous slides, you saw that there was a market response around KYC and AML and onboarding. So we at Fenergo have coined that client lifecycle management because there's a lot of things. There's onboarding and KYC and AML. There's a long process that encompasses client lifecycle management. So when we typically engage with our global banking clients, I think that there's a common theme that's been articulated earlier is we're no longer we'll be the what's the best way to say this? We'll never be as less digital than we are today, right? Things are moving at a rapid pace and digitization is happening day by day. So for the financial services firms that have to deal with the client experience and client expectations of being more digital, they also need to follow the rules and regulations as the previous speakers talked about. So it's a tough job. It's not easy, especially if there's complexities, as Guillermo talked about, of cross-geographical business lines, products and regulations that fall into different geographies. It's very complex. So at the end of the day, the clients are expecting a kind of simple journey into the financial institutions to make it as easy as possible, yet it's easier said than done. So we look at the client lifecycle management process in that way, that horizontal function, and that's what we spend exclusively all of our R&D dollars and all of our time doing. And if there are three outcomes that we look to engage our clients upon, it's really breaking down into three domains. The first one is client experience. We talked earlier about things are becoming more digital, ready access information, instant gratification. A lot of the fintechs are focused on the client experience. So are we, in a way that just makes the onboarding, offboarding, maintenance process and dealing with financial institutions, whether you're a retail customer like myself, opening a checking account or a mortgage, or I'm an institution looking to do derivatives tradings or larger transactions. So there's a client experience improvement that we're driving towards, which helps bolster the innovation around the financial institution. As the more digital we come, I think financial crime and compliance is just more complex. I think it was articulated very well by Jose and Guillermo. So at the end of the day, we're focused on that. Really, that's where a lot of our intellectual property exists. I'll talk about that in a few minutes, but our tried and true pedigree is really the rules and regulations, and we've got 100+ jurisdictions mapped. So we'll talk a little bit about that in a second. And then lastly, we take a look at process. A lot of the systems and architectures in many institutions have been evolving over time. So to Guillermo's point, we move at fintech time. That might not be the bank's time, and we recognize that. So how do we create consumable wins around operational efficiency, knowing that large institutions have a culture of change that can be very difficult, and that's just not within banks, but everywhere. So how do we create consumable wins around operational efficiencies? And that's really what we design our engagements to look like. So at a very high level, I won't spend too much time on our highlight reel, but a couple important things to talk about here. We have about 100 global banks on the platform. That ranges from the North American market, the Latin American market. We're headquartered in Ireland, have a great presence in EMEA, as well as our investment in Asia Pac in the Middle East. So about 100 global clients, and plus the jurisdictions that we've mapped. So we wouldn't be effective at our jobs if we didn't understand each and every country's local jurisdictions. So we've got about 30 to 35 people dedicated in our financial crimes and rules and regulatory division that are constantly working with the regulators in the countries that we operate or that our clients operate to make sure we're staying abreast of the regulatory requirements. We've been around a long time, 12 years. We're very fortunate, and I won't spend too much time on this, but we just achieved a unicorn status, which I think is very important and we're very proud of. So we were given $1 billion valuation recently through our latest private equity round. Why is that important on a topic like this? One, it's great for the country of Ireland to have an Indigenous company get that. And second, I think it really shows the level of investment into this space. So a lot of R&D dollars are going into us making sure that we can continue to invest and innovate to serve our clients, given the aforementioned challenge around digitization and client experience that are rapidly evolving. Next slide, please. So just to give an understanding, I won't spend too much time on this, but we're very proud of this. This is 12 years in the making, and this is not a full list, but gives you an understanding of who we engage with, right? So we've got the large global banks that have jurisdictions across the globe. We've also worked with a lot of domestic banks within the jurisdictions and clients and countries that we operate in. So we've got about, I think, 9 global offices and got a global coverage. So this is just a snapshot of fortunately the clients that we've engaged with thus far. So why are we investing in Mexico? I think I can't say it any better than the way that the 2 previous speakers articulated. For me, it's an exciting market. I think there's a lot of things going on in the fintech as well as the banks. A lot of innovation coming out of Mexico that I think can be emulated in other parts of the world. So as our growth strategy at Fenergo has evolved, we are now looking at heavily investing in Mexico and other key markets within the Latin American geography, Mexico being the primary. I won't spend too much time on this other than the fact that we see a great market opportunity for Fenergo. Earlier slides demonstrated that there's a lot of fintech investment. What we didn't see and what we haven't seen necessarily is a focus in the regulatory and technology. So if we take a look at those market respondents focus around KYC and AML, we feel that we've got a great market value proposition based upon the pedigree and our focus on a very complex space. It's not easy, but at the end of the day, we feel we've got a market advantage, bringing our global expertise to focus in Mexico and helping not only the multinational banks, but the domestic banks that serve a lot of the population in country. So if I can wrap briefly, and I'm going fast according to time, so hopefully you're following along. I think for us, it's about partnering for success is about a couple of things. The first thing is building trust. It's understanding the market. Who are we? Developing partnerships like the chamber, being involved in communities. Just because we've had success elsewhere doesn't necessarily mean we're going to have success in Mexico with the things that we've done in other regions. We've got to really make sure that we're following in line with the regulations with Senor Quesada's group and others, but also really understanding the nuances of the Mexican market. And we're going to continue to foster collaboration and innovation. I think there's a lot of investment in fintechs in Mexico that can continue to drive a lot of innovation for Fenergo, not only within Mexico, but in other areas. So we're very excited to collaborate with the other innovative firms that exist in country. And then lastly, we're looking to make a positive impact, not just on the client experience and profitability for the clients that we serve. But we talked earlier about financial inclusion. We're heavily investing in the ESG and making sure that can we support banking the unbankable or the financial inclusion. So it really drives back to having a positive impact. That's not just success for the top line or bottom line of Fenergo. It's really about what impact we're making on the community. So I really appreciate everybody's time, and hopefully that gives you a good snippet for who we are, what we're doing, and how we view the success in Mexico to come.
That's great. I'm sorry, can you hear me? Thank you very much. There's a little echo to mute. Thank you, Patrick. Thank you very much for your presentation on partnering for success in Mexico and the experience that you've had at Fenergo. And may I say many congratulations on achieving Fenergo's unicorn status. That's really something special to celebrate. I know that valuations have been racing ahead, particularly in the European Union. Ireland is driving a lot of that investor activity, as we mentioned at the start of the event, and hopefully the day that Fenergo will achieve DEC Acorn or a plus 10 billion valuation is not too far into the future. Patrick, and Mexico and Latin America provide a very fertile ground for that strategic development and for partnering with Mexico and regional fintech players like Banorte, working with the Regulatory Commission, as you said. I have a question, which is, I think, given your experience as an Irish global fintech player coming into the Mexican market, could you maybe just speak briefly to what has been perhaps the most positive aspect of that experience, and what area you think that from the point of view of the financial institutions here and the regulatory context is perhaps the most important opportunity area for collaboration in the market as you see it?
Yeah, great question. I think community forums like this are critical for our success, really understanding different perspectives. I'm not just saying that because I'm on this. I am an actual very big believer in the chambers and communities, because I think sharing information and really understanding the market dynamics, not just from reports that are published, but from the people that are dealing with these challenges or setting policies and regulatory guidance, is really important for us. The more we can be immersed in the culture, the better we'll be. So I think that's probably been the primary focus for us. Is we've got a lot of experience. We have existing clients in country that really were part of global rollouts, versus now we're making a concerted effort and investment into Mexico. So things like this, talking to thought leaders like Guillermo, which I've had the pleasure of talking to him outside of the Irish Mexican Chamber events. So it's just getting an understanding, talking to clients, really understanding their pain points and challenges, and then understanding the nuances. Just because it works somewhere else doesn't mean it necessarily works in country or jurisdiction-wise. So I think that's been the biggest value for us, is really getting immersed into the culture, really understanding the environment, bringing our thoughts in a global perspective in region, but localizing it based upon the requirements and the goals and objectives of the clients in the market.
Thanks, Patrick, and that's a great answer, and certainly also echoes what Guillermo was talking about earlier in terms of companies like Fenergo and those who will follow behind coming into the market, really understanding the market, getting to know, doing your research, and really helping to understand what the pain points are and where the value can be added, rather than making assumptions about what that might be without having done that research. And certainly, I guess that was key and critical to the success of Fenergo coming into Mexico. Patrick, thank you for that. I think we have room maybe for one more question before we bring our session to a close. And I think one is for José Antonio, if I may go back to you and ask you about the issue of, we talked a lot today about reg tech, payments tech, crowdfunding and API, etc. But the area of insurtech seems to be an area that perhaps the culture of risk management is not so well developed. And for a country like Mexico, that depends, like many other markets in this region and around the world, on remittances for the dynamics of the marketplace, it's such an important area. In terms of the risk management culture, is there a comment that you'd like to make around insurtech, José Antonio?
Sure. Let me tell you that I think insurtech would be a very important area of opportunity, because talking with the new Association of Insurtech, they have very interesting data about the lack of culture that we have for insurance, but the momentum is there. As you may imagine, the pandemic has caused the people to react and to think that there are some insurances that they are not having, just for driving or for their own medical expenses. So it seems that the companies may offer something very specific and be more innovative and more flexible in their offer than traditional insurance companies. So talking to him, he says that he would like to use the sandbox that we have also for insurance companies, and I think it would be very welcome. Our sandbox is not only for payments or for crowdfunding. We can see other fintech entities going there. So I concur with you. InsurTech is a big area of opportunity.
That's great. Thank you, José Antonio. And certainly, again, a call to the collaboration on the innovative solutions that can be provided and collaborating with the sandbox to work in that area as well. And the last question briefly for Guillermo, which is coming in from Lorenzo in the chat around whether you see fintech cannibalizing your regular digital banking services, if that's presenting a challenge or a risk for your business, or is it really, let's say, a rallying call and a business opportunity for your bank, obviously working in the ecosystem to create additional services, as you said, horizontal, creating value services. What's your view briefly, Guillermo, on that question?
I think, I mean, if you look at the recent announcements we made a couple of months ago, we created a joint venture with Rappi to either cannibalize our business ourselves or actually beat them to it. So we are obviously very wary of what the fintechs are doing. We're monitoring them carefully. We don't see a huge cannibalization process at this point, but again, that's no process like this starts big at the beginning. So we're watching it, and what we're trying to do is participate in it as actively as possible. So I mean, and just to show, I mean, we partnered with Rappi and we're offering our customers Rappi credit cards. Okay, so yes, it's something that we think is an opportunity for everybody, and we're participating as closely as we can.
That's great, Guillermo. Thank you very much. And thank you to José Antonio and Patrick also for participating with these excellent presentations, for responding to the questions of our attendees today. We really appreciate your attendance and at this webinar. I want to say that we will be sharing this recording not only across our respective social media of the partnership of the Embassy, the Irish Mexican Chamber, and also Enterprise Ireland, but we will also be sending the link to the almost 200 people who registered for this event, and of course the group who have taken the time out this morning to join us in this really interesting and important webinar on fintech opportunities. So we're going to bring our event to a close now with a short video on fintech in Ireland, really very brief, and also a slide that overviews from Enterprise Ireland, the government agency, the services that the agency offers to Irish business coming into Mexico in collaboration with the Irish Mexican Chamber, in collaboration with the Embassy of Ireland here in Mexico. And my final word of thanks to one and all for your attendance, and most especially to Ambassador Maeve von Heynitz for her distinguished attendance and inauguration of our webinar today. Gramila Mahagat, buenos dias a todos, muchas gracias por acompañarnos. Have a good day, everybody. We're going to leave you with this short video on FinTech Ireland. Thank you for your attendance and have a great day.
Ireland is Europe's fintech powerhouse, and here's why. We're right at the heart of European tech, with 10 of the world's top born-on-the-internet companies calling Ireland their European HQ. Facebook, Twitter, Google, to name a few. And we're home to 8 out of the top 10 global software companies. Our small and medium businesses have technology in their DNA. That's why they're ranked #1 in the EU for innovation. We're a global financial services hub. Over 250 of the world's leading financial services companies have chosen Ireland as their home away from home. Half of the world's top 50 banks operate from Ireland, and 40% of all global hedge fund assets are serviced here. We're a world-class fintech leader. From regtech to payments and authentication, Irish companies are solving some of the industry's most complex challenges with collaboration and innovation. And fueling this innovation is intense investor activity. In fact, Enterprise Ireland has invested in over 80 deals for fintech companies in the last 5 years, making it Europe's biggest fintech investor. These fintech deals, combined with financial services companies, have helped generate over 1 billion in revenue last year. It's probably not surprising then that Irish fintech companies are helping the biggest names in financial services to compete and succeed worldwide. So if getting the advantage matters to your organisation, talk to Enterprise Ireland. We support over 200 of Ireland's most innovative fintech companies. Our industry advisors in your market will understand what you're looking for and shortlist the best partners for you. We'll even make the introductions. So get in touch with us today and get Ireland's fintech advantage.
So that's it in a nutshell. Connect with us, continue to collaborate with us, continue to participate in our events. Our next one is coming up in October on technology partnerships. As I said, Ambassador Maeve von Heynitz will be joining us then with a wonderful panel. We look forward to continuing the conversation. Thanks very much once again to everybody y muy buenos días a todos y todas. Bye bye.